It's Toronto's podcast on the Canada's Podcast Network.
Today we're going to meet with Nora Jenkins Townson, who's the founder of Bright and Early, an unconventional HR consultancy that has helped some of the most successful startups scale. So Nora, welcome to Canada's podcast. Great to see you. Why don't we kick off by, you telling us a little bit about yourself and what you do, that kind of 2 to 5 minute review of who Nora is. Okay.
Absolutely. I grew up as a hippie kid on a flower farm, and I really wanted to move to the city and work in advertising. And what I found, when I reached that, mythical world of work was that a lot of things were really a mess. People didn't enjoy where they were spending their 9 to 5. And, I really wanted to make that better. So many people fall into HR, but I'm one of those people who got into it on purpose. I went back to school, studied in, that area. And my dream was always to be on the employee experience side of things. So, all those things that we think of as bad experiences at work, like, the hiring process or the onboarding process or performance reviews. I wanted to make all of those things better and oriented towards personal growth. So I've been in the HR space for about 10 plus years now. I've been saying that for a while, so it may be time for an update. And I've always been on that creative side. So ad agencies, creative areas, and then many years in tech. So I spent a long time at FreshBooks, which is kind of like an early tech darling in Toronto. And I was also an early hire at Wealthsimple, where I headed up everything people there. And from there, I started Bright and Early, which is my current venture. So Bright and Early works with growing, scaling businesses, usually between 10 and 150 people on staff, and we help them build absolutely everything along that people journey. And from a lens of, creating an amazing employee experience and also keeping an eye on, making sure those processes are inclusive. So we're currently a team of 5, and we work with clients all over North America.
So, you worked at Wealthsimple, you worked at FreshBooks. Why are you being an entrepreneur? Those are great companies. Are entrepreneurs sort of wired differently? Why did you move out from such great companies?
Yeah. So really just the opportunity to continue to build. So, as I mentioned at Wealthsimple, I was a pretty early employee. So everything around, recruiting or HR hadn't been built yet. And we needed to scale super, super quickly. So we hired, over 100 people in that first year that I was there. And you can't just dump 100 people into a company and expect them to succeed without the kind of scaffolding there of good processes. So we needed to create an amazing recruiting experience, create an amazing onboarding experience, and everything along that line. We needed to make sure that people were growing. We suddenly had a lot of new managers. So there was just so much to build. And I'm really a builder. So, we got to a point there where, I had a team that I was managing, and my role was a little different. So we were opening in London and New York at the time. I was doing a lot of traveling, and my role was more on the management side of things, and I really am a builder. So, even though, I was so happy with the company and so happy to, be a part of something so awesome that's, continued to build great things, I found myself unhappy with that particular role. And I have a really strong relationship with Wealthsimple's founder, Michael Katchen, who's just an amazing guy. You can't find a single person in the world to say a bad thing about him or working with him. And we had a lot of kind of heart-to-heart discussions over it. And he said, Nora, you're a builder. And I figured if I went to a different company and helped them through that same building phase, if I did my job well, the same thing would happen to me over and over. So I wanted to have the biggest impact. I wanted to work with as many companies as possible to help them through this really tough and challenging step of I want to be a good place to work and I'm growing really fast. Please help me. And I also just kind of wanted to see into a lot of different companies and how they make decisions as well. One of my life career dreams is to stumble upon, the magic formula that no one's found yet as to, what makes an incredible company that's really productive and really happy. And, starting bright and early gave me lots of chances to look into that.
Okay. So, you say you're a builder, so you're an ideas person. Some of our best ideas come when we least expect them. How do you, disconnect, reach out? How do you get inspired? I mean, do you have a process, or is it just like completely random?
Yeah, so we have a really good process for doing that as a team right now. So we really want to think outside the HR box of, how things have been done before. So we have a time every week where and also a channel in Slack focused on inspiration. So we bring inspiration, whether it's through outside speakers or, one of us doing research or reading a book and, bringing it back to us. And we've looked into things like, service design thinking. We use a lot of that. We're looking these days, into, how do societies, that are successful arrange themselves. Like, we're trying to take inspiration from indigenous cultures, et cetera. Like, a lot of it is about like how people organize in a way that's like harmonious and productive. And we're trying to think kind of like outside of work for ideas that could be applied. But we're always looking at, what other companies around the world and, other countries are doing, just trying to look beyond like the norm of our lens and our bubble that we live in, and bringing those back and seeing if we can take some lessons.
I don't want to make this a COVID thing particularly.
Yeah.
But I mean, maybe we should just, you're in the HR end of things, in the tech side of things as well. I mean, just for everyone, what have you seen change in the last 90 days, kind of thing?
Well, the big obvious one is remote work. Working in tech, there are a lot of companies that we work with that were already remote friendly, but surprisingly, a lot of them, when they are in that hyper growth and building stage, a lot of them actually were pretty staunch on working from an office. A lot of tech folks like investors, VCs, things like that are pretty adamant that, okay, you have to be able to have those, in-person run-ins in the office, and you need to be able to tap someone on the shoulder to be able to build really quickly. And so we actually did have a number of clients who, while otherwise quite forward thinking, were not open to doing any remote work or working from home. And they've really kind of come around on that now. Some of them are actually, becoming huge advocates for it because they just kind of hadn't tried it, and needed to tweak their processes. So I think that pivot, there's obviously a lot of challenges around that as well, like making sure that people are, engaged. How do we measure someone's success without, seeing their butt in a chair at work? And that's something we already should have been doing, because they could be doing anything in that chair, not necessarily working. And of course, lately there's also, a lot of folks having to deal with childcare on top of working. So there's a lot of conversations around that and what's broken there. And then also the Black Lives Matter movement, resurfacing at this time, and, a lot of pressure on employers on, how they're going to engage in that.
Okay. Without giving too much away, I mean, what's your vision? What's sort of the opportunity in your particular industry over the next, let's not say 5 years, that's way too out there, the next 3 years kind of thing?
Yeah, so I think that there's an opportunity to build a new way of how we think about designing companies, and kind of a new vision of HR. So I think there's still a lot of folks that think that, it is focused on, paper pushing and rulemaking and policy writing. And these days, again, as we're seeing from the current movement, people want to buy from companies that treat their employees well, that have, a heart, that are diverse. And, there's just, the stakes are so much higher, and companies with those factors, companies that are diverse, companies that, have great employee engagement, they just perform better. So I think our opportunity is to kind of find the perfect formula and be able to scale that. So that's kind of our ultimate vision of, we're working with all these incredible companies, what are the top ways that, these incredible companies can be built? And then, what can we share about that? Can we scale it, beyond just consulting? Is there a vision there? So I think that's what we're moving towards. And an inspiration for us there is like the design thinking firm IDEO. So they really, like, when you think about, the process of design thinking, you think about IDEO. If you want to, if you want something, designed at a top level, you go to them. And, if you're trying to build something, internally, you may go to them for consulting expertise on that design thinking methodology. So I guess we kind of want to be like the IDEO of HR. They're thought of like very forward thinking as well. So
it's good.
Yeah.
What's the greatest challenge you've faced to date in the business?
I would say the greatest.
Is it this last 90 days or is it?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a tough few months for sure. I think a lot of it is just like the uncertainty of the first little while. So, not knowing, is the business going to continue to do well through this? Like, are these companies that, we've been advising and kind of shepherding, like, are they going to be okay? Are the people around us going to be okay? So just that uncertainty. And then from a leadership perspective on my team, I have folks who are, really caring, and, having to be like in that leadership position. And I think all of us are who, run companies or manage anyone during this time. It's really tough to, when you don't know, to be able to, keep up and inspire that confidence in people. And, how much, if I'm worried, how much do I show that? Would it worry them more, or is transparency better? So I think I went through a lot of thinking on that, and so did a lot of leaders that I know. And in the end, I went with transparency overall. So kind of like sharing my feelings and worries and thoughts, but not in a way that kind of bent into venting. Like if I felt like I had to do something like that, I would go to someone else.
When you're faced with these kind of challenges, have you kind of got a process that you use to overcome them, or do you just meet them head on, one at a time, kind of thing?
Yeah, I don't know if I have a perfect answer for that. I tend to be really motivated by, protecting other people. So for me, it was, I have to do right by these companies that I serve, for my amazing team, things like that. So I'm kind of like playing like blocker on things. So, that really motivates me as, keeping other people safe and, solving problems for them. But you have to take time for self-care as well. So, recently we've gotten the go-ahead from the province to expand our personal bubbles. So I have expanded that to the flower farm where I grew up on. And
where's the flower farm?
They're up outside of Aurelia.
Okay.
Yeah, you can buy wildflower seeds from them. Wildflower Farm, that's what they're called. And yeah, so I've been going up there with my husband and son and dog, just for a few days at a time, back and forth, and that's been great for my mental health for sure. So like reconnecting with nature.
Let's move on to some kind of lessons learned. If you could go back in time, what advice would you give your 20-year-old self?
Oh boy. Just that it's going to be okay. I mean, I'm not one of those people that had their life together at 20. I went through a lot of challenges when I was younger with mental health and a few other things. And it took many years, to get to a point where, I am where I am. And, I love that I'm able to kind of provide us like a safe haven of like a great place to work and help other people create that too. So that's kind of my work in the world. But I would say, yeah, just hold on, things are going to get better. And like maybe maybe make some better dating choices. I don't know. It's not that kind of show, but
Yeah, it's okay. It's good. What advice would you give an entrepreneur, looking to start a business? Well, let's be specific in Toronto, or GTHA really. You've done that. Is there some specific things, processes that you could pass on?
Yeah. So two things. One's more on the general entrepreneur side and one's on the HR side. So even if it's just you and you're solo, like really invest in a good accountant. One thing that I learned is that, accounting isn't accounting. There are kind of scale, like I think of it as a scale of like 1 to 10 in terms of where an accountant lies risk-wise. So 10 is like Wild West cowboy, like you're probably going to get audited. And like 1 is like literally works for the government.
Yeah.
Understand that. I made a few mistakes around that were like pretty costly that I ended up fixing later. So yeah, do your taxes, work with, like, just pay for a really good accountant, just do it. It'll come back to you in spades.
Put your tax money away.
Yeah, exactly. And when you're hiring, when you're ready to expand your team, have a vision for what kind of place you want to build in terms of like what it's like to work there, even if it's just one person. So, your mission in, what you're trying to build as a company will, be attractive in hiring, but so will that vision of, what kind of employer you want to be. And there's small things that you can put in place from the very beginning. Also, don't just hire your friends or the first person you know that can complete the task that you have at hand. That can be a rough thing to go through. I see a lot of startups go through that. It seems like overkill, but write out a real job description, ask everyone the same questions, put your posting out there, put it in a lot of like diverse different places, go through, even if you get 200 applications, go through all of them and really make a process there. And, evaluate people equally on that, those questions that you design. I think a lot of people, want to work with their friends and they fall in love with that idea, or they, fall in love with somebody's like personality or just enthusiasm, or they feel like, hey, I'm early on, I should kind of take what I can get. I think those are not so great. So definitely have that hiring process. Another important lesson that I learned is, again, taking it back to it's going to be okay, is sticking with your values as an entrepreneur. So there was a time, when I first started out, it was just me. I didn't know like how many bookings I would get. I didn't know how many clients would, so it was kind of okay, I'll take what I can get at first, because I was coming from a place of fear. And, there was one particular company and CEO that, I took an assignment with. I didn't vet them enough for value alignment, which is something I do very heavily now. Like, what kind of company do you want to build? What do you value? Like, who do you want to be like? So I didn't do enough of that. And, I showed up on that first day and it was just so not aligned. Like, there was totally a culture of fear. It was all cubicles. Nobody spoke to each other. I found out that they had been through like so many different service providers before and didn't take any of their advice. And I didn't go back after that day. I wrote them a very polite email and offered to introduce them to other suppliers. But, for me, it was, the lesson there was, find partners and clients that really, really align with your values at the core, and don't just take on any work that comes your way, because the more value aligned work that you take on, the more will be attracted your way. And that's the reputation you'll build.
Totally agree. So, that's your advice to people, I love this mentorship question. What's the best piece of advice that you've ever received? The one you carry around and, it's always there in the back of your mind. Kind of thing.
Yeah. My favorite piece of advice that I got was about horizons. So a lot of the, when you're standing in a place that you are, in your career or anything that you're building, you see one horizon and, you keep going towards that horizon. But once you reach that one, you're going to see a new one and a new one and a new one, and just keep going for that horizon. You're not able to know 5-10 years down the road what it's going to look like. But just like when you get there, see the next one. And for me, that says a lot, because I think a lot of people are searching for like something to be really passionate about, like, in their careers, like they're kind of wandering around waiting for passion to hit them over the head. But I think passion comes from mastery a lot of the time, and you have to see a few horizons before you can get into the complex details of something and get really passionate about it. So I think about that a lot. I went to a really awesome training by my friends at Raw Signal Group. They do like manager and boss training called Better Boss. And one of the last activities after learning for a few days was to write a postcard to ourselves to remind ourselves of, a business lesson or something that we've really learned and wanted to remind ourselves of. And they would mail it to us later. And I just drew that horizon.
So some quick questions, rapid fire questions, as I tend to call them. Are you a morning or a night person?
I'm morning now that I have a toddler. He forces me.
If you had to pick one word to describe yourself, what would it be and why?
Tenacious. Because I've been through a lot, and I don't give up. I always see the positive side of things. If something goes wrong, I find a way around it and to keep going.
That's a common one in entrepreneurs. What book are you currently reading?
I'm currently reading How to Be an Anti-Racist. We are doing a book club with the author's discussion questions on our team.
What's keeping you up at night, apart from your toddler?
That's an interesting question. I think same answer as the book. I've been going through a lot of learning in the past few weeks. I'm someone who's always kind of identified as like, hey, I'm an ally, when it comes to issues on race. And I think what I'm realizing is that you can't really be an ally. You can get comfortable in that identity and stop learning. I think you can make actions that are either in allyship or not. And, what you can do is choose to make those actions over and over and keep learning. So I'm doing a lot of learning around that right now, like a lot of people.
Okay. And last but not least, I don't know whether you listened to the end of any of the podcasts, but we have a tropical island question, which seems very nice, seeing as none of us can go there at the moment. So there's a small tropical island which we can take you to, with only one phone booth and no internet. Mm-hmm. We drop you off with no technology. Mm-hmm. At any time, you can use the phone on the island to call the boat to come and pick you up. How long do you last before making the phone call? And what would you do until then?
Probably a week. Knowing comfortably that I would be able to make a phone call and leave, I could stay for a couple of weeks. Mm-hmm. And I'd be able to call my family and, tell them that I was cool. I think I would actually try to really do the whole thing, like pretending you're stranded thing. Because I think everyone's curious about how they would survive in a situation like that. And we don't often get to actually play that out. So I would try. I would, build a shelter. I would scour the island for supplies and plants and things like that. I'm pretty good with plants because of where I grew up. So I have some foraging skills. I would build a shelter. I would build a fire. I'd try and vacation like that for a couple of weeks, but if I ever got really hungry, I could always call. So.
Okay. Nora, that's great. Thank you very much for the interview. It's been really fun. Our listeners and viewers often want to connect with people, not me so much, but with my subjects, because they see something or hear something and it kind of so how can listeners find you online?
Yeah, the best way to connect with me is probably on Twitter or via email. So you can check out Bright and Early at brightandearly.ca, or you can follow me on Twitter at Nora JKS.
Okay. Thanks, Nora, and thanks for coming on to Canada's podcast. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Phil. Thanks for having me.